I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy Live. We are so excited to have as our first guest, Gregg Bishop. Now, he is the executive director at the Joe and Clara Tsai Social Justice Fund. So it is wonderful to have you here, but let me also introduce our Savvy panelistas. We have Christina Newman-Scott, Lisa Bing, and Phyllis Whitethorn. Now, I wanted to start with a quote that I read, and it says, "When it comes to dismantling systemic racism and economic inequality in our communities, we want to lead by example. That's why it's so important for us to invest in Black leaders combating injustice from every angle here in Brooklyn." Now, this was Clara Tsai. Talk to us about this Social Justice Fund and the meaning of those words.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. This is exciting. It's great to be in person. So the Social Justice Fund was started after the murder of George Floyd, and it was recognition of a number of things, including the fact that we saw, the organic nature of the racial justice protests that occurred, but particularly the Barclays Center Plaza became sort of like the rallying point. I think everyone on this panel knows about, sort of like the economic inequalities that we've seen as Black people in this country. But I feel like after the murder of George Floyd, the rest of the country woke up and said, oh, wow, this really is a thing, right? And you had a number of corporations making a lot of pledges. And certainly, Clara Tsai, who's the founder of the Social Justice Fund, comes from a background of social justice advocacy. And her parents, her grandparents, so this was important to her. So it was a $50 million commitment over the next 10 years to invest in Brooklyn to address racial justice and economic mobility. And one of the reasons why she talks about leading by example is because as one of the co-owners of the Nets in New York Liberty, she has a platform where she can lead by example. She can actually test and use different ideas, test it out in Brooklyn. You know this already, but I have to put it out there, right? Brooklyn is the size of the city of Chicago. Absolutely. Right? Yes. We are an enormous city in it by itself. And so if we try something here in this borough and it's successful, then other municipalities can, and that is the goal, right? We want to try different things. We focus on dismantling systems. And so one of the first things in the pandemic, when Joe and Clara actually bought the team was fall of 2019. And really getting acclimated to the city, and we all know what happened in the spring of 2020. Our whole entire world's changed, right? You guys went virtual. For the past 2 years, we've been adjusting to where are we?
And we could finally talk about race.
Right, yeah. Right.
And wide open.
That's
wide
right.
open.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so Joe and Clara used their resources to get PPEs to the city. If you remember early March, there was a lot of pressure. And there was
Seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't. When we were wearing masks and we didn't have what we needed for people.
Correct. Right. And so, coming and so focus on what's next. This was the sort of like the next thing, right? But it's not just the Social Justice Fund. Anyone can go actually on our website at bksjf.org, and you'll see a 5-point plan that Joe and Clara actually put out. One of that 5-point plan was the Social Justice Fund. Okay. The others was, for example, empowering players to have a voice, right? Looking at
the NBA players,
NBA and WNBA, but literally, the players need to have a voice, and giving them the space to have that voice, right? Right. The WNBA tends to be a little bit more, when you talk about social justice, tends to be a little bit on the forefront. Because if you remember, the WNBA players were the first ones to start wearing sort of like Black Lives Matter shirts, et cetera, right? Yeah. But giving them that space, but then also, looking at the culture of the parent company for Black employees. looking at using their platform to actually advocate for social justice.
Oh, this went deep.
This was
went
deep.
This was
Yeah.
transformational.
So
Right.
knowing that, thinking of, okay, we had to provide PPEs to individuals, what can we do? The first thing the first thing Clara did was listening, right? She went around and talked to a lot of people in Brooklyn. Because one of the other things, you don't want to come in and assuming you know what's best for a community.
That's the worst thing.
Right? And so there was a listening tour. A lot of ideas came up. Then there was building the infrastructure. So it was hiring an executive director. Then once I was hired, then we had to hit the ground running.
Now, there was a reason for, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question because a lot of organizations, as you mentioned, during that time, pledged a lot of things. They said there are a lot of words, right? And my question is FAD or foundation? And it sounds like this is foundation. How long did it take from the listening tour to creating the plan to hiring the executive director? Because I think that's where a lot of organizations and companies get stuck.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah,
I'm being kind.
Yeah, I would say about maybe 6 months or so, because I started talking to Clara in the fall,
Right.
And I started in the spring, and literally from day one, it was building a program to help BIPOC businesses, so Black, Indigenous, people of color owned businesses in Brooklyn, because why did we start there? Economic mobility.
Yeah.
To your question, in terms of economic mobility, we have seen, even before the pandemic, Black-owned BIPOC businesses were in trouble, right? Gentrification, access to capital, you name it, technology, right? I remember when I was the commissioner for small business services, I was talking to people about stop going on Amazon, go to your local store. There was all these other pressures. And the pandemic was sort of like the nail in the coffin for a lot of Black-owned businesses. And so what we wanted to do was stabilize the loss of Black-owned businesses in our community. So we created,
Which I think is a brilliant idea. I know what you're getting ready to say, but it's brilliant.
So the thing is, it's literally, we created a loan fund. And anyone out there could say, well, that's, everyone creates a loan fund. But again, going back to dismantling systems, right? In order to get capital, usually what you need is what? Collateral and a guarantor, right? But embedded in collateral and guarantors is systemic racism, right? Collateral is property, real estate, right? And I could spend the next 15 minutes talking about redlining and this country's way of preventing people of color from actually owning real estate.
Well, being out of the economic mainstream.
Exactly.
And before we move on I just want to highlight the fact that it took 6 months from idea to execution. That is the difference is commitment.
It starts at the top.
Yeah.
But
it's true commitment as opposed to a lot of talk.
Right.
So
I just also wanted you to talk more about this loan fund because something that I found really interesting was that they needed to have character references.
Right. So
and I didn't understand that.
Right. So here's where we talk about dismantling systems, right? So we are using this as a test case, right, to demonstrate that to the financial markets that you could look at and evaluate risk in an alternative way, right? And that alternative way of evaluating risk was, and we talked to a lot of lenders, and they were like, no, we could do this in terms of looking at the viability of the company. So, did you break even? Did you make any revenues in 2018? Yes. Do you have a character reference? Someone that could vouch for the business, the importance of the business. And that's all we needed.
What does vouch mean?
So literally, I know this business, I know this person, this business is important to the community.
And the quality is there.
But it is the collective responsibility, right? And so I now know that you vouched for me. Right. So now I am going to.
Oh, it's peer pressure.
It's peer pressure.
It's peer pressure.
It is peer pressure. I cannot let you down. Right. And so we looked at that. So we committed $2.5 million. We worked with 2 CDFIs as community development financial institutions for those who are not familiar. And what we were looking at is over the next 3 years, we'll see how this program goes. We do measurement and evaluation. And then what the goal is to actually present the findings to the financial markets, to other people. Right? What we have seen in the first year, we've approved over $1.8 million. So we're way ahead of schedule in terms of the funding. And 70% of the businesses that we've helped in Brooklyn are owned by Black women.
That's what I found so interesting. Can you explain that? Meaning,
So-
how does that happen?
And what
Or
businesses? What type of businesses?
There's all types of businesses. So everything, if you think of and we worked with the Brooklyn Chamber, right?
Yes.
Because we worked with the Brooklyn Chamber because they have the boots on the ground. And every type of business you could think that makes a community, right? Everything from childcare. There's a childcare business in East Flatbush that needed dollars to actually expand. There's a restaurant right down the block whose owner succumbed, well, one of the owners succumbed to COVID, and they were about to close. And literally, this loan helped them like actually not only retain the staff, but reopen. There's like a bar out in well, it's actually more than a bar. It's a restaurant/bar in Bed-Stuy. There's a chocolate factory in Williamsburg. There's so many different
What about
types
the hairdressers?
Oh, there's a Jamaican hair salon on Utica Avenue and Eastern Parkway, and this was the first. And so the concept of character reference is not new, right? There's a number between Kiva, Grameen. There's a number of organizations that, and internationally you've seen this, but they only go up to $10,000, right? Because it's risky. We are going up to $100,000.
Wow.
And so some of these businesses, this is the first time they're getting a loan for the right size capital.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges that women entrepreneurs face is getting the right size capital to actually effectively run their business.
Now, what about technical assistance, though? Because
So-
to me, it's
I think
starting
you're
a
reading my
business.
mind.
Yeah, that's one component of a
Yes.
much
I
larger
want to
system.
hear about what you do on that
So,
level.
so not only are we lending the money, and again, as a foundation, we are not actually looking for a return for those dollars, right? Those dollars will stay circulating within the community, which is why the sort of peer pressure, right? It's sort of, if you repay this loan, you now can act as a character reference to someone else, and now someone else can benefit from that, right? So we're going to actually measure how that pressure is actually leading to the repayments rates that we're seeing, right? We're looking at, in terms of when you're talking about technical assistance, everyone that has gotten a loan from us is eligible for free technical assistance. So the business gets an evaluation. Basically, it's a benchmark on where they are as a small business.
With the starting point.
Exactly. A lot of small business owners don't know what they don't know.
Right, right.
Absolutely,
Right?
right.
It's like, like, I want to sell
Not
books.
until something happens.
Not
Then
until
you
something
find-
happens,
You're like,
right?
oh.
And then you find out I needed an accountant, or I had an accountant, but it was a wrong accountant.
Did you say I need a 1099?
Right. Like, my uncle's nephew who studied accounting in high school was probably the wrong accountant
Right.
for my business,
Right.
right? And so helping business owners understand this is the type of accountant you need. This is the type of legal advice you need. This is where a business in your size, where you should be. And then we built out a custom curriculum, and all the offerings, the technical assistance is actually offered by MWBE. So it's actually a minority business counseling service, and they are working closely with. So everything we've had understanding your financials. We've had, and you understand this, social media, and actually how to actually
Use it effectively.
to build customers.
So the research component, how is that being handled?
So we have an individual who basically is evaluating everything that we're doing.
Okay.
And we're going to release a 1-year report that's going to talk about the things that I just talked about. And every quarter we have reports in terms of how the portfolio is performing. Because the language the financial sector needs to hear
Right.
is that our portfolio is performing
Yeah.
better than average, right?
Exactly.
Based
Right.
on this new method.
Yes.
Because then what we can say...
And the methods have to
replicates.
be validated.
Exactly.
Well, that's
and
my
so we have
question.
and we have the data.
Yeah.
It
We have
becomes
the
a
data.
model. It becomes a
It
model.
becomes a model.
Right.
But then also think of who we're talking to, right? We're talking to the financial sector, and we're talking about a population that's the fastest growing in terms of entrepreneurs, Black women.
It's true.
And you are missing that population
That's
because
right.
you're choosing to evaluate risk in the old-fashioned way.
What
right?
percentage of businesses are owned by Black women in New York City?
It's a low percentage.
It's low.
Yes, because based on the stats I have from the city's MWB program, only 3% of the total population and I think it's over 10,000 businesses, are owned by Black women.
All right.
And those businesses tend to be small in size. And
Right.
why? Because of access to capital.
Exactly. You can't build.
Right,
In fact, it's difficult to start without being seeded
Right,
by
exactly.
But I
Exactly.
was interested. I love that you're doing technical assistance because the sustainability, it's so integral. Like you're
Yes.
just not going to be
Absolutely.
sustainable if
Absolutely.
you don't have the skill set.
Yep.
Are you partnering with external, like the Brooklyn Chamber? Who's leading the charge on the social media curriculum, the technical assistants.
All MWBEs.
So it's
we-
like train the trainer.
Exactly.
By thereby extending
Exactly.
the community.
So we have
That's good.
a women-owned business that's doing the technical assistance for social media.
Yeah.
We actually use that business to do our digital marketing. So again, we want to actually pour into the community.
That's great.
And that's why we want the money to stay circulating. So that's just one component on the economic mobility side. We actually have a couple things cooking in terms
Okay.
of how do we help create more new businesses.
Yeah.
And because of the data that we have, Clara is very data driven in terms of thinking through impact and what should we do, right? And so the next sort of iteration is how do we help women of color
Right.
to actually start businesses, right? Then the next thing that we're doing, in addition to helping women of color start businesses, is looking at how do we bring more tech companies to Brooklyn. So we're looking to do a tech accelerator because access to venture funding for people of color, founders of color, is also a challenge.
And one other question I had, because this is so interesting.
Yep.
Clara also talked about making the sports arena a cultural destination.
So
what does that mean? What does that look
Yeah,
like? 'Cause
so-
when I think of a stadium, I'm not thinking, pretty pictures.
You're
I'm
not
just
thinking
saying.
about art,
Right,
right? So,
that's it.
so
Well,
that
I
was
think about art.
I know, but you're an art. Yeah, right.
You think visually,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that was the economic mobility work, right? But then we have racial justice, and that is such a large topic in terms of like what we can do. But surrounding all that is art, right? You cannot have a conversation about social justice without having a conversation about the arts.
That's true.
And Clara is a big supporter of the art. So one of the things that we did was she commissioned a piece of art
Yeah.
by Tavares Strong.
The We Belong Here.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know
Yes.
Tavares.
Yeah.
Tavares, Bahamian
Yep.
born.
Amazing artist.
Amazing artist. And it was to pay homage to the fact that when I started off by saying that organically the plaza became sort of like a town square.
It
right?
sure did.
And so
Right.
Especially with the
Right.
BLM
Yes.
protest.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right. It did.
So the we belong here and the you belong here is a reminder that this is your space.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right? But it's also a reminder that as a culture, and Brooklyn being sort of like the city that it is, we have so many different unique cultures here. And so we actually did a campaign over the summer to ask people, like, what does belonging mean to you?
Right.
And we supported, based on how many people responded, we supported a couple
What kind of things
organizations.
did you hear? Do you remember?
So,
I don't wanna put you on the
a lot of
spot,
people
but
talked about like being able to be authentically myself, right? And being accepted. I am West Indian, and I love the fact that I can go on Flatbush Avenue and still get my culture. Or I am from South Asia, and I can go to Sunset Park and find the foods that So there was a number of different things, and then there was I'm just myself. And when I walk down the street, no one really says, "Oh, like
don't
what are you
belong
wearing?"
here.
Or "You
Right.
don't belong here,"
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So there was a number of things, but we decided to support a couple organizations. Weeksville, for example,
Great.
Brooklyn United, which is a terrific marching band, Brooklyn Defenders, BPI, which is a Barred Prison Initiative. Clara is really big on on actually criminal justice as well. She does a lot of work with the Reform Alliance.
But you know that even though, the arts are not only nice, they're necessary for
yeah.
any thriving community. And economically in New York City, the economic impact of the arts here, and this is not like fuzzy numbers, this
Yep.
is the
No.
Bureau of Economic
Yep.
Analysis,
Yep.
okay? The impact of the arts on New York City is greater than
Yeah.
shipping,
Yeah.
warehousing,
Yep.
transportation,
Yep.
construction,
Yep.
and retail.
Yep.
Right.
So if we don't think that it's big business and small business, we're absolutely going to be left
I could
out.
go a little bit deeper. Think about
Yeah.
our education system and the fact we don't have
Yes.
arts in the schools.
Well,
What a
And
big
think
missing.
about what,
Right.
and think about what happens when you
Absolutely.
are like exposed to the arts.
Yeah.
right?
Oh, no, I know.
we did
Graduation rates increase.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we did we funded a Basquiat influence curriculum with DOE.
I saw that.
And
It was
expa-
great,
and that
yeah.
is and so it was terrific to see we expanded from 50 high schools and middle schools to now 75. We're going to continue that program. But at the end of the program, the kids put together a piece of art,
Yeah.
right? And we've done this now 2 years. Last year was interesting to see how therapeutic that work was.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Right, because you saw a lot of image of police brutality. You
Right.
saw
Yeah.
a lot of images of
Sadness.
young men
Yeah.
who were sort of like worried and scared, and they're reflected in their art.
Right.
So that is therapy.
It's healing.
Yes,
I
it's
mean,
healing.
It is
I like
healing.
that word. Yep.
I remember after 9/11.
Yep.
And I was working at Con Edison, and we were sponsoring some things,
Yep.
and I went into the schools.
Yep.
And in the schools, they had the children create art.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
All kinds of art. They just gave them the opportunity to express themselves. And I remember that the kids, when they came and they were presenting to us, the tears sometimes running down their faces, the smiles. But what I remember was the feeling of just letting go.
Yes.
Now
very
we're going to wrap soon, so I want to get this, if you don't mind.
Wait a
Just
minute.
one little question
We just
for
started
Greg.
talking.
I know. You know, but you told me a story about yourself because I'm so intrigued by you. And
Oh, no. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm intrigued. But you told me a story when you were in college around a radio station.
Yes.
Tell that story about just how you were able to raise money for that. Just, you know, for being very thoughtful. It's a good story. I like this story.
Come on,
So,
Greg.
I mean, I have like so the one thing I would say is that the reason I'm passionate about this work is because I think about the fact that, you know, we are creating opportunity. As an immigrant, my mom came to this country for opportunity. She created an opportunity for me to come to this country. And certainly, you know, there are other Gregg Bishops out there. And so I ended up going to Florida A&M, even after I dropped out of college, et cetera. And Florida A&M has a terrific radio station called WA&M Tallahassee. I could do the radio voice right now. But one of the things was, you know, we worked, and as a college radio station, you know, we have limited funding, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually, I put together like a whole deck in terms of like the reach that we have, like, you know, got all the students trained, et cetera, so that way we were more professional. And the programming was so great that even the commercial stations started copying us. So we introduced, I mean, we always had jazz, but we introduced like soca on Sundays.
Yeah.
We had a public affairs show like this one called Saturday Morning Show on Saturdays. And we literally, and we went out and, you know, the state of Florida was doing like a campaign to help with natural disasters.
Right,
and
hurricanes.
And we were able to get the largest contract from the state, not the commercial stations, our station.
Look at that.
Because of the reach that we have and because of the usage. So, I mean, like, that's one of the reasons why this work is so important to me and easy for me, because I've worked in so many different areas, but I've seen the impact, right? I've seen the impact that a HBCU has in terms of someone being able to graduate from a college.
And talk about
university
belonging.
and talk exactly, and that's why I know we're almost out of time. But when I tell people, when folks say we can't find this person, especially when you're looking for diversity, I always say you're not looking hard enough.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not looking hard enough.
Hair.
Yeah, because you don't have to look hard.
Exactly.
You really
That's
don't.
right.
If you're connected, you don't have to do
Well,
any of
even if you're
that.
not connected,
Right.
you know I need to do something different.
That's
Right?
Well, we are going to have to close, but you
Oh,
were
man, I need to come
fantastic.
back.
I know. Yes, I'm glad to hear you say
I didn't
that.
even
You
start.
need to come back. We are not finished.
Yeah,
with
it's
you.
going to be
All
a
right.
5-part series.
All right.
Greg.
There you go.
Well,
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you
And
so
thank
much,
you for all the work
Greg.
that you do. All right.
Yes,
Awesome.
and thank you so much, you know, Brooklyn Savvy audience, and to our Brooklyn Savvy viewers. We will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.
This summer, for example, we did a blockchain boot camp. We wanted to, again, you know, this is new technology. It's Web 3. I actually started my career with Web 2, right? I taught myself how to code and got a full-time job. And it's a longer story, but I understand what you're talking about in terms of opportunities. So it was for high school kids. And we had kids from Clara Barton. Of course, we had kids from Brooklyn Tech. We had kids from all the technical schools. But the goal is really to expand it so we have kids from all over Brooklyn who will be exposed to this language, right? Because whether you are 16 or 60, everybody's learning about blockchain and everybody's learning about Web3 and what the decentralized internet is going to, what the future of decentralized internet will be for this next generation. Then second, we actually funded 2 organizations, Marcy Lab School, so they actually do a tech training program. And there's a lot of them around, but their unique model is that they actually have a relationship with companies. So when you are, it's an apprenticeship type program. So when you actually start the program, you select the company that you want to work for. So it's like a panel. The participants meet the companies, they learn about the culture of the companies, and they select, I want to work for this company. And then they learn all the skill sets that's necessary. And most of the graduates are making $150,000 or more, right? That's economic mobility. And then the third area is another organization called Hack Diversity. So there are actually, and I know you're talking about students who college may not be their thing, like I was one of those individuals. And one of the challenges, we were talking about the education system, it has not kept up with technology, right? And so young people are way ahead than the professors that are in the college. And in some cases, those young people will graduate, but they don't have the skill set that one of the tech companies are looking for at the moment. So this organization called Hack Diversity is filling the gap. And so we're helping them expand into Brooklyn. So there's a number of unique things, but everything, if you notice, everything that we're doing is leading to mobility. So when we evaluate an organization, we look to figure out the impact.